welcome everybody. Hi, I'm Julian Bolding. We are super pleased today to welcome Jeff Fromm. Jeff, it's got up very early for this. It's 7 a.m. in Kansas City. And we're especially grateful to him, not only for that, but for stepping in at relatively short notice when Paddy Loftman, who was due to speak today, has to drop out for family reasons, but we hope to get Paddy back at a later date. So I mentioned Jeff is in Kansas City. Kansas City, as you probably know, is famous for three things. Firstly, yes, they won the Super Bowl. Thanks, Jeff. I wonder when we are going to get to that, and very well done for the Kansas City Chiefs. Secondly, and this is not even known to the US president, but I was told many times when I went to visit Kansas City, it is not in Kansas. So don't make Donald Trump's mistake. It's actually in Missouri. And the third thing it is famous for is the home of one of our wonderful agency members, the Barclay Agency, which is in the old Hughes aircraft factory, and actually has Howard Hughes's first attempt at a space rocket on the roof. So, you know, eat your heart out, Elon Musk and Richard Branson. You know, Howard Hughes, the factory, and Barclay have been there first. I don't think it actually made it to the moon, but it was a valiant attempt. Anyway, welcome, Jeff. It's great to have you here. I'm going to hand over now to Stephanie to give you the safety briefing, and then introduce Jeff, and we'll be started. Go on, Steph.
Excuse me, I was on mute. Hi, thank you all for joining us today for our webinar Wednesday. My name is Stephanie Fox. As Julian mentioned, I'll be moderating the webinar. The rest of the team is also on the call. We've heard from Julian, we've got Paul Squirrel and Lizzie Gold, and we are all available if you need any help at all. So just some housekeeping before I introduce our speaker. You can find these on a PDF in the chat box, but I'm just going to go through them quickly. So in terms of timing, we're on our 5-minute intro right now. Jeff will speak for about 35 or 40 minutes. We're going to have about 10-15 minutes for a Q&A, and we will finish by 1:55 London time, so you can be ready for your next virtual appointment. Please do keep your microphones on mute at all times. If we're calling on you to ask a question, we'll just unmute your microphone. That being said, we would appreciate it if you keep your videos on, so Jeff has some friendly faces to present to. We're going to have a Q&A portion at the end, but if you have any questions in the meantime while Jeff is speaking, you can send them to me or my colleague Lizzie directly in the chat. So to do this, you should go to your chat box where it says to. You should see a drop-down menu. Instead of everyone, just select Stephanie Fox or Lizzie Gold. So we'll go through all of the questions, and we're going to select a few to ask Jeff once he's finished speaking. So all questions should be sent to us rather than, you know, to everyone, just to avoid confusion. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, if you just want me to kind of call on you, just say so in the message, just write, I'll ask. If you prefer for me to just ask your question, just say so, and that's fine as well. You should hopefully have your Zoom viewing mode set to speaker view. If not, just click speaker view at the top right of your screen instead of gallery view. Our speaker will be presenting with slides, and if you can't see Jeff's speaker window when his slides are on the screen, just select show active speaker video. If you have any technical issues, just message Lizzie Gold directly in the chat, or you can email Lizzie at lizzie.gold@thenetwork1.com. We'll be recording this webinar, so if you prefer not to take notes, you don't need to, and you can also share this with your colleagues afterwards. And hopefully the system won't crash, but if it does, just wait a couple of minutes and log back in with the same link that you used to log in this afternoon. I thank you very much, especially if you've been on these before and you've heard that before. Thank you for your patience. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker. So Jeff Fromm is a partner at Barclay. He's a weekly contributor at Forbes and author of 4 books, including The Purpose Advantage, Marketing to Millennials, Millennials with Kids, and Marketing to Gen Z. He published the first public research study of millennials as consumers with the Boston Consulting Group in 2010 and 2011. He has traveled the world sharing insights on consumer trends, youth culture, as well as purpose and sustainability. In addition to Jeff's work consulting with major brands at Barclay, he serves on the board of directors at Three Dogs Bakery. In this pivotal presentation, Jeff Fromm will use his world-renowned consumer expertise to provide you with data-driven insights that drive results. Without further ado, I will now mute myself and turn over to Jeff. Jeff, could you unmute yourself, please? Ooh. Hold on, Jeff, there we go.
Hi, everyone. I think we're all set at this point. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Julian. Appreciate the kind words and the opportunity. I'm grateful to be able to have such a big international audience. My last international event was a 20-minute presentation on Gen Z in Hong Kong in early January, which seems like it was years ago to fly all the way to Hong Kong to give a 20-minute presentation. But the audience was right and all that kind of stuff. So the journey for me at Barclay started in 2009. At the end of 2009, I was hired as head of sales by the CEO who I'd worked with in the past. And at that point in time, the company was financially healthy, but strategically not healthy. Fortunately, we're in a much better place even during this crisis than we've ever been before. But back at that point in time, we had more than 50% of our revenue with one large restaurant brand, Sonic Drive-Ins. They've been a client for nearly 20 years and changing marketing people frequently. We knew it was only a matter of a handful of years before they might leave. So I don't know about you, but I wanted to run my sales program based on people calling me. And so our CEO was like, well, how are you going to do that? I'm like, I'm not sure yet, but it's going to be content marketing. Now in 2009, when you said you were going to build a new business program on content marketing, you became sort of the redheaded stepchild at the agency. So I did a bunch of Google searches and I got back terrible answers to my Google searches. Now, I don't know if you have failed at searching at Google as frequently as I failed at searching at Google, but I failed again and again and again. And I decided either there was no information on Google on millennials as consumers, no matter how you asked the question, no matter what terms you used, or the topic was just irrelevant. Called a friend of a friend of a friend. She was the global head of research at the Boston Consulting Group. And I said, hey, friend, we'll pretend her name's Stephanie since Stephanie's the moderator. Hey, Stephanie, what do you say we do some research together on millennials as consumers? By the way, I don't have a lot of money for this, so I would need you to pay for half the study. Now, I've just called Stephanie and asked her on a date, and I've asked her to pay for half of her own dinner. All right, now, Stephanie says, I just want to make sure I understand. I'm the global head of research. You want us to do a study, the Boston Consulting Group with Barclay, this relatively smaller agency, 400 employees in the US. We're a big global company, and you want us to pay for half your study. I understand the ask. Is that correct, Jeff? Yes. She says, we're not in the business of doing research for other people and paying for it, Jeff. I said, I understood that before I called. So she says, I'll call you back. Now, I'll call you back is code for what, Stephanie? You don't need to answer. We all know the answer to that, folks. I'll call you back is code for Stephanie is never going to call me back. 10 days later, Stephanie called and Stephanie said, Jeff, we're going to do your study. No one in the world has done it. We do think it is actually a big topic. And yes, we will pay for half of the dinner. With that, things got going. I wrote my first book on marketing to millennials, held a conference in San Francisco designed to lose money as a new business effort. It generated a $55,000 profit, and the rest is history. Now, I want to jump into the presentation now that you have the quick backstory. Barclay is an independent agency, much like the agencies you operate. And I would tell you that you know, challenging times for all of us, right? It's not easy. So I want to talk a little bit about salespeople. Now I'm a salesperson. We're going to go to the next slide, Stephanie. And I want you to use adjectives. Feel free to use the chat box. And I want you to use adjectives to describe a stereotypical salesperson. I'm going to give you a minute. Now I'm going to give you 10 seconds because I'm over-promising. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to write down some adjectives about stereotypical salespeople. Go ahead. Okay, I see some great adjectives coming on. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I think many of you had some of the same thoughts I had when I thought about a stereotypical salesperson. Now, I want you to take a moment and think of a professional salesperson and use adjectives to describe a professional salesperson, someone you want to work with, someone who you look forward to seeing. Now, I'm only changing one word. I'm going from stereotypical to professional. You have another 10 seconds. Super. All right, let's go to the next slide. So as we think about this professional salesperson who gives before they ask, who's empathetic, who is many of the things you've already identified, I think it's important in this time of crisis to understand this is what the best agencies and what the best brands try to do. The adjectives that you used in the chat box are actually very accurate. And the best agencies and the best brands are using these kinds of adjectives to guide their thinking. And that's not the easiest thing to do. Next slide. And I say it's not easy because it's human nature to panic. Imagine there was a global event in London. The Network One was getting all its partners together. I was on my way to London to give this particular talk. Imagine that plane I'm on suddenly dropped, just a little bit. It dropped. I would panic. Now, I know planes don't fall from the sky, but it's human nature when the plane drops, then I'm going to panic. And what we've seen is that. We've seen this pandemic create a sudden drop that we weren't expecting, and our inclination, normal inclination, would be to panic. And what I want you to do is to try to avoid panicking and hold on to the adjectives that you used in the chat box that I also shared with you around empathy and listening and giving before you take, all those kinds of things, being helpful as your sort of guiding principle. And I'm here to tell you, at least at Barclay, even though the pandemic is a terrible health crisis, it has not become a financial crisis. At this point, we haven't had to lay any of our 400 staff off. We haven't had to take salary cuts. And our clients, while some of them are closed because we work with AMC Theater and Planet Fitness and a variety of brands that aren't operating, on the whole, our clients are doing relatively well, minus a couple that are really feeling it terribly. So the next slide, I'm going to just take a minute and discuss. It is a COVID framework, and it's not the first COVID framework we published. It's actually the second, and it's about being helpful, not just to our clients, but to people who follow our content. And this particular framework is meant to guide brands on how to think about what they should and shouldn't do during the crisis. And as we emerge from peak, there's going to be an evolve phase, which is going to be nonlinear, very complicated, and difficult for brands to navigate because it's nonlinear. Brands are used to navigating things that are a little bit more linear and predictable. If you're interested in this framework, it's a fairly deep read, and it will take more than 20 or 30 minutes, which is about how long I have left in this webinar. So I'm going to suggest you could go to barclays.com. There's a page called The Future Cast, which is where we share our content, and you can read this entire framework. It's about a 10-page doc, okay? Next slide. I think you've already hit the nail on the head in the chat box. Being useful and empathetic will be the key to winning, not just with Gen Z, but with consumers in general. So let's talk about one brand that's already winning with them. And the next slide would be the brand you are looking for, TikTok. Yes, TikTok is absolutely winning with Gen Z. Now let's talk about Gen Z for a moment. Gen Z was born largely between 96 and 2010. Their internships were pulled from them. Their college and high school graduations didn't happen as planned. Their proms were canceled. And they're really feeling the impact of this, probably in many cases worse than we are as adults who will restart our careers, perhaps with some steps back before we get forward, but they'll feel it worse than most. And TikTok, which serves a Gen Z consumer, a consumer who's an old soul in a young body, wanted to lean into that. And they recognized all these things. And the next slide describes, I think, a wonderful action they took, which is a promposal. And the promposal was a chance to get dressed up and come together and on April 21st, receive the opportunity to really have a fun experience in the virtual world. So this is a brand that understands their consumer and was trying to be empathetic to the fact that they faced a lot of adversity. They're not the only brand that understands their consumer. Let's go to the next slide. Disney decided to pre-release Frozen 2. Now, if you're a stay-at-home parent with kids who aren't in school, Frozen 2 is like a gift from above, right? I mean, it's like, woohoo, kids have something to do, and Disney understood that. Next slide. Another brand that I wasn't actually that familiar with until about a year ago that was doing amazing things in the crisis is Allbirds. They gave away $500,000 of their product to essential workers, healthcare workers in the front line, and you can purchase a pair at a very deep discount to donate to a healthcare worker. Quick Allbirds story, I was in New York ahead of an event last year, a real live event, not a virtual event, of course, and I decided to walk into the Allbirds store. I wasn't very familiar with the brand, and it was madhouse. It was packed. And I thought to myself, this is going to be the worst shopping experience of my life. And I walked out of there thinking, not only was it one of the best shopping experiences of my life, this is the most comfortable product. I'm not sure I can wear my really fancy dress shoes to the presentation when I have these wool runners on now. They're almost impossible to take off. And I say that story because it's a brand that understands, even in the chaos of a store that's packed in New York City, which was the situation last year when I was in the store, how to deliver an amazing experience. Next slide is a client that Barclay works with. They're a New Jersey headquartered grocery brand. And before the crisis, we were doing a lot of work with them on private label strategy and having quite a bit of success, to be honest. I had the privilege of speaking to their owners in Salt Lake City last summer. Of course, I was working in New York City at the time, so I did the New York to Salt Lake round trip for the day, an always fun 5-hour flight each way with a 4-hour delay. Of course, their headquarters office is 20 minutes from where I was working in New York, but the retreat was in Salt Lake City. So it's a great brand. They're a grocery chain, and they decided to do a big pivot. And that pivot was an idea we took them around 5 ingredients, 15 minutes, and a recipe challenge, inspiring consumers on how to come up with new things in their kitchens without leaving their house and have fun with meals. Instead of taking you through this, let's jump to the video and share that, and then we'll go from there.
Taking on ShopRite's 5 ingredient challenge to see what I can come up with basically ingredients that are right in my kitchen.
I will not lie, but if you ask where I'm staying tonight, I gotta be like.
All right, guys, so it is nothing new around here that I'm not a big cook in the kitchen, but being home so much, I am trying to contribute a little bit more around here. So I am taking part in the ShopRite 5 ingredient challenge. This is a recipe with just 5 ingredients and will take you no more than 15 minutes to make. If I can do this, anybody can do this. And I'm actually going to challenge 5 of you, I'm gonna leave your names right here, to join me on this. So we are going to be making a tomato galette. Next, you're just gonna take some parchment paper and you're just gonna roll out your dough into. So all I did here is I just folded the crust right over the pizza all the way around, and then I'm whisked together my egg and a little bit of water, and then I'm just gonna coat in the oven for about 20-25 minutes. All right, and then here's the finished product. So we cooked it on 350 degrees.
Taking on.
All right. So another example is a client that Barclay works with called Taco John's. And we made 2 changes very recently with Taco John's in order to try to help them. One, and you probably aren't familiar with the brand, but it's a restaurant brand, quick service restaurant style. For those of you in the UK, it has a small cult following, like maybe a Nando's chicken, but at a price point that's probably a little bit lower. Anyway, we wanted to lean into value, so we created a 6-pack and a pound promotion. That was one of the major changes we had, and we can go to the next slide. And the other change we made, which was significant, is when we went into the grocery stores, we were all observing that there were no frozen foods, frozen vegetables, frozen burritos, everything was empty. Like in our grocery stores, the frozen sections were just empty. So we made a lower price point frozen burrito from Taco John's, so you could just pick it up from the to-go window. You could take it home with you. You could heat it up in the microwave, and then you could serve it to your family. And these two changes largely helped Taco John's keep most of the revenue they expected to lose during the crisis. Not all, but most of the revenue they expected to lose, and continue to serve their guests and keep their employees employed. Next slide is a story for Planet Fitness. Over here in the US, there was I remember flying back from an event in Vegas on a Wednesday in early March, and on Wednesday night I was told don't come into the office, and on Thursday we told everyone in the morning the office is closing at the end of the day. You can come in tomorrow if you need to, but otherwise take your stuff. We're working from home for the time being. Who knew the time being would be a perpetual thing? But we also had a large client, probably one of our largest clients, Planet Fitness, close all their gyms. And over that very same weekend, we developed an entire work-in program. Now, we've seen a lot of gyms in the US do this. We were the first and the largest gym to go to this kind of format, literally on 24 hours notice, creating content, broadcast quality content to the best of our ability, with often with celebrities, sports celebrities, Hollywood celebrities, etc., and making available for free. And then a final example that is probably going to appeal to Gen Z folks is for Thrivent Financial, which would be on the next slide. And this is a pre-crisis example. And I was asked to come to New York to give a workshop for the ANA, which I did. And I met some folks from Thrivent along with a few other folks. And then they asked me to come to Minneapolis. And Thrivent serves a largely older consumer base. I mean, they have lots and lots of consumers who are baby boomers over the age of 55. And so I was intrigued that this large financial company, and again, this is pre-crisis, a couple of years ago, is very focused on Gen Z, and the book had just come out. And so I literally just, put this to bed, and I walk into the offices at Thrivent, having never been there before, and there are about 100 sticky notes in here. The CEO has read the book upside down and backward, and I've put the book to bed, which means I'm no longer thinking about the book, which means he knows more about the book than I know about the book as the author, because I'm not thinking about it anymore. And we have this great meeting, and during the course of the meeting, they invite us to do some workshops and start collaborating on some projects. And the leadership team and the CEO say, we have a purpose, we have a mission here to help people make better financial decisions. And we think a lot of people take on too much debt. I said, that's interesting. I said, your purpose is actually in conflict with your profit. He said, it's not. He said, our purpose drives our profit. He said, you see, if you make better decisions, you're going to be happier. And if you're happier, you're going to buy other things from us. And so while we might make less profit on that one loan product, we'll have a bigger financial relationship. You'll be happier. Ultimately, our purpose is achieved by you having financial peace. I thought, wow, it's a very enlightened view. I mean, how many of our clients would say, buy less of our tacos or buy less of our whatever, right? And so I said, fair enough. And I pushed pretty hard on this. I said, so you're really comfortable going down this road. So our team wrote a brief, and then with that brief, we turned one of our first assignments into this video assignment designed to help them activate and live their purpose. And with that, I'll go to this short video.
So this is 4 years of college in ping pong balls. I will be doing a BA in theater with a minor in musical theater.
I'm studying psychology. You can't ever really read people's minds, but it's as close as you can get to it.
I chose political science because I want to go to law school after I get my bachelor's.
I've loved math all my life, so it was natural to choose that.
I know that I have to take them out, and
you're borrowing money from, I guess, some unknown entity, and then you're going to have to eventually pay it back.
I know I'm going to be paying the government, but I'm not exactly sure how the whole payment process works.
What I do know is that I already owe a lot of money to a lot of different people. I feel like Houdini. One semester?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
This is gonna be me.
by the end of next year. Is this the 4 years, or are we not done yet?
We're not done yet.
I'll sleep outside! I don't like this. There's more.
So personal expenses, laundry, travel, clothing, food, that sort of thing.
Oh. Yep.
My face is itchy.
That was a lot. So it's 4 years of tuition and fees, books, and room and board. And then on top of all of that, you have a bucket full of interest.
What's the button do?
Let me get these out of here real quick.
Well, that's better.
That's so much better. Glad that's gone.
Being in the box was like, this is my debt.
I didn't think about interest debt. It's something that I am going to start thinking about.
Being able to click that red button and release all that stress.
I need a lot of red buttons in my life.
So.
All right. So I told you I came into Barkley. I accepted the job December of 2009, started January 2010 as head of sales. And our CEO was new in his job as CEO. He'd been there a few months, not new to Barkley, but new in his role. And at the time, we were financially healthy, strategically in a terrible place with more than half of our revenue with one client. Fortunately, we're not in that position today. We're much larger than we were then, and we don't have any one client that's even probably close to 8 or 9% of our total revenue, which is great to be in that position given the business we're all in. And the CEO made a number of really smart decisions, and two I would highlight. One is a focus on culture. In 2010, put a big focus on our culture, which at that point in time was not the most common thing. Today, it's probably more common, knowing that we'd have to win inside to win outside. And the other was he took a view strategically that we wanted to offer a fairly integrated type of services. Now we're a US agency. We clearly don't have the international capabilities, which is part of why we joined Network One, so that when our clients had international needs, we'd be able to tap into folks to help. But we wanted to be able to be pretty solution neutral, holistic in terms of our view and to create ideas. In fact, many of our assignments are consulting assignments and idea assignments. We still get most of our revenue from the downstream work that would be similar to the work that probably many of you produce every day: digital work, content work, media work, things like that. And so one of the challenges with that was coming up with new ways to celebrate inside. And so we created a number of new rituals. And I think rituals are really important as you think about your culture. We have company meetings, and I would say our company meetings, which now happen twice a week, they used to be once a week before the crisis, are really, really, really fun. They're usually 30 minutes. We'll get most of the 400 folks across most of our US footprint to join. They're optional meetings, but they're interesting, they're fun, they're entertaining. And one of the other rituals we created was a program which was designed to augment Bring Your Kids to Work Day. And Bring Your Kids to Work Day was sort of a failing program for us. We had a lot of employees. More than 50% of our senior leaders are female. They're largely under the age of 45. They have young children. And this Bring Your Kid to Work Day program was terrific when people had older kids, but a lot of these folks have 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And bringing a 2-year-old in for a full day of work, it's just not a winning program. So we created a new program in May about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago now, called Bring Your Parents to Work Day. Now this May, we didn't have the program. I'll take you through what we did instead. But first I want to take you to this new ritual we created called Bring Your Parents to Work Day. And the best way to do it is going to be with video, so you can understand how we allowed our employees to celebrate our culture.
I'm not sure why he chose advertising.
I think advertising chose him.
My husband laughs all the time. He said that she goes to work and does Facebook basically all day long. So,
and I'll say, what did you do today? And it usually just sounds like he's eating out or editing video.
Can we revisit just the strategy first? You know, what led to taking this approach?
Has anybody ever experienced virtual reality?
Oh, Dick, you should see this, honestly. Oh my gosh, I'm falling.
Welcome, moms, to the Social Command Center at Berkeley. DENK is like a term they use that say, like, this is a good, high-quality thing. And it comes from weed culture for that.
Oh. You're like, it's dope, it's good, yeah. It's like whatever, dang.
How heavily are you ingrained in the weed culture?
Not heavily.
Okay.
Spirit Airlines, how can we make a 4th of July themed email a little bit weird?
What about the founding mothers? You know, they never get mentioned.
Yes.
Oh, look at this. Oh, my word. Oh, I'm glad I went to the restroom.
No body hair. Some off of the legs a little bit. He's a pretty hairy guy. Some on the happy trail.
This is an easy one to wrap up. We have the Founding Fathers got around, and so can you. I think this is a solid email. I'm going to type it up so we don't forget it. I'm putting that in for July 4th.
I'm just tickled pink that I got to be here, and I hope I get a chance to come back again sometime.
I just know she's awesome, and that was just an affirmation.
I love knowing you all, knowing he's with people like you all. That's so cool.
I learned that I'm really proud. I'm really glad that you're doing what you love with really cool people. Sorry.
You're making me cry.
So this year, as a surprise, since we didn't have the Bring Your Parents to Work Day program, we all received a package at home. It included some Justin's candy and Haribo, some client things, and a T-shirt and a wine mug. And the idea was we all are together, 400 offices, one Barclay. I do want to make sure I hit some of the key points from our Gen Z research. I provided case studies today, but if I were to hit some of those key points for you, the biggest myth about Gen Z that needs to get debunked is that they're disloyal. That's not accurate at all. They're discerning. This device right here, this is a modern day Swiss Army knife. And there's no Gen Zers who are going to call you back. They're just going to use it to crowdsource information on the brands that you work with to decide what's best for them. And they're old souls in young bodies. And if you were to have read the book, you would know that's one of the major findings we found in research. And I want to explain it briefly. And that means they're digital, social, and mobile to the bone. They're digital, social, and mobile to the bone, but they also have values around hard work, values around getting ahead. They're financially more savvy than young people. I'm getting a fair amount of reverb. They're more savvy, and they just shop differently. Let's go to the next slide. They shop differently in that they don't necessarily trust brands, and they rely on the information they can get from the palm of their hand in order to look at ratings and reviews, in order to talk to friends. And it's not just one friend. It's not like I talk to one friend. If I'm looking at cooking, I might have a friend. If I'm looking at going out for drinks, I might have a different friend. If I'm looking at travel, another friend. So I go into these mini networks, and these networks are different depending on the category I'm in. And for each network, I can get to the different friends I have to curate the best information for me. And I can do that very rapidly. If you have teenagers at home, you know they can get to a very rapid decision. And so the challenge we face as we think about navigating this for brands is most brands have a lot of direct and indirect competitors. And we often end up focusing so much on the direct competitors that we forget the indirect alternatives. And so if I was managing the cereal category for a brand, I would have the challenge of trying to beat my nearest competitor. And if I focus so much as Raisin Bran might have, I don't know, on shredded wheat, all of a sudden I forget the need states, the palate states, and the reasons that someone might use this brand at breakfast. And all of a sudden Greek yogurt replaces cereal. And the truth is this entire category, as an example, has been replaced by another category. And so even if you're the most successful cereal brand, you're probably doing relatively poorly because you're not focusing on the consumer enough. You're focusing on the competitor far too much. And as we think about TikTok, an emerging Gen Z brand, one that's gaining a lot of momentum, it's that empathy that they showed that most brands missed on. Most brands didn't pick on the fact that their internships were canceled if they were Gen Z, that their college graduation or their high school graduation was canceled, and that their prom didn't get to happen, a big event in their lives. And so as we think about this consumer, understand they're very discerning, not disloyal. They're, the term old souls and young bodies describes their behavior being very digital, social, and mobile, but at the same time, their value set would look often like someone who's over the age of 50 in a research study versus someone who's 17 or 21 years old. If we go to the next slide, you know, when I give talks historically in the physical world, I talk a lot about brand love. And I try to help people understand that what your parents said about love might not be true. My parents told me there was no connection between love and money. And I'm here to tell you, when it comes to brands, there's a significant connection between love and money. In fact, the most loved brands absolutely generate the most money. And historically, what drives brand love is consistency and spontaneity. And the challenge is during this crisis, there's a third lever you need: consistency, spontaneity, and then another lever around being empathetic, as well as a trend toward value as the recession or the economic impacts of the crisis affect consumers. And so what I would say is being a more loved brand is a much stronger place to be. It implies that you're going to have a frequency of purchase and price elasticity advantage. And for most brands, that's the difference between winning and losing, because we don't have exclusive monogamous relationships with a brand. What we have is preferred brands. And whether that's Nike, Apple, Google, TikTok, or Glossier, or any number of other brands, these brands have an edge. And that edge is the emotional connections they build with a consumer who's absolutely not disloyal, but rather capable of trading up and trading down. And Gen Z is the ultimate day trader, trading up and down for the brands they love and paying a small premium and down to private label to make their budget fit when they can't afford it. If we go to the next slide, during the crisis, I've had to obviously change what I'm doing. I'm trying to publish every day. If you have a major brand you work with, I'm interviewing executives all over the world. I interviewed someone from Switzerland about 2 days ago, and looking at what brands are doing and how brands are acting differently. And it's the actions that brands take. It's the use of a verb around how they're marketing that interests me most. And I'm trying to publish something every day to inspire brand leaders and marketers to how to think and act differently during a crisis, and then publish it in Forbes. And then finally, the last slide. If you're interested in any of this, feel free to be in touch. My email address is there. I've got an entire report on Gen Z and COVID that we just published recently. It's free. If you want to read the report, you can get it using that link. Just write it down. We'll leave this slide up for a minute. Obviously, there's other research that not only I've published at Barkley, but other people have published, and then the book, Marketing to Gen Z. If I leave you with one thing, don't buy into the myths you've heard about people. Gen Z is not a group of folks who are largely lazy and unemployed. They're actually quite opposite of what you think. And they're not millennials to the third power. That will be the biggest failing strategy in marketing. Gen Z is a very discerning group of consumers. They are very much the old souls and young bodies that I tried to describe. They are digital, social, and mobile to the bone, but their values are very much around hard work and around action. And brands that take action will get noticed, and brands that talk and don't take action will fail miserably. Thank you for your time. We're 40 minutes in. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A, and happily we'll take questions about anything I've covered at this point now.
Great, thank you so much for that. I've had a couple of questions in. So someone from the audience has said, TikTok has just announced it will launch a campaign to market itself on TV. Does that surprise you? Isn't it going to lose credibility?
Surprise? Not really. It's possible that as TikTok becomes more mainstream, that it will lose some of its Gen Z audience and get replaced by yet another brand. I mean, Facebook started out as a Gen Z brand, right? It started out before Gen Z even existed, serving only college students. Over time, it grew and grew and grew, and now it's really popular across generations, particularly with older consumers. And so TikTok's trying to expand in much the same way we've seen other brands expand, Twitter, Pinterest, etc. I think if that happens, it's likely TikTok will get disrupted. What we've seen in our Gen Z research is that youth culture is often the canary in the coal mine with respect to consumer culture, and age is a mindset, not a number. And so TikTok could become very popular with older consumers, but I think if that happens, then it's likely someone else will replace them as a niche brand, and then we'll see if they decide they want to try to scale as well. The more TikTok has success with people who are older, the more likely it will be hard for them to hang on to the younger consumer that brought them to the dance, or prom, as it were.
Great, thank you very much. We've had another question. You have an international audience. Do you think your summary of Gen Z works across the world?
I absolutely think it's true in places where the culture is a democracy, and prior to the crisis, the unemployment rate was very low. And I think it's completely untrue in other parts of the world. So when I started the year in Hong Kong making my presentation, I was abundantly clear with the senior executives from a large brand that that to the extent Hong Kong had, sort of roots in China, there's no comparison between the government of China and a government that's based on democracy. So I think there's a lot of truth among Gen Z in nations where there is low unemployment and democracy. The flip side would be in nations where there's high unemployment or not a democracy. Don't take this and apply it. Don't use this data. There is not one size fits all. The only way to get a really accurate view on Gen Z would be to do specific research in a specific country, and likely also about a brand. Even when we're doing work on Gen Z, we tell the clients you can't just use the research we've done on Gen Z, which is, if you've read it, and some of you have and some of you haven't, likely it's a very detailed quantitative study, but times change. So I would not apply it across the globe.
Thank you. Another question. Someone said, unlike Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., TikTok is a China-owned brand. Does this influence user attitudes?
I don't know that I have an answer to that question. I think that some people would know TikTok is a brand that or has origins there. Other people wouldn't. I would guess largely that my guess would be largely that it's not having a significant impact, or they might not have as much success as they're having right now when we're in a pandemic, and the origins of the pandemic were in China. But that's a guess. And my instinct is people don't care. And at the end of the day, it's a successful platform based on the quality of the platform. That's a guess.
Great, thank you. I've had another question. Someone has said, TikTok and other social media platforms demand brands to have a voice and a face. Aren't brands reluctant to put so much power in the hands of someone who might not be aligned with brand values? Or on the other hand, aren't brands conditioning too much what that face may do and say, resulting in artificial content?
If I fully understood the question, I would say brands are relatively used to social media at this point. TikTok is a new form of social media, and so it's going to be a higher risk platform for brands. And there are going to be some brands that are not going to be comfortable in any way, shape, or form giving up that much control. The flip side is there are brands that are known for their risk taking that will use the platform, and in some cases win big by understanding how that platform works and being willing to take risks. So, those who are willing to take the risks and do it well will be winners, and those who get aligned with the wrong folks, obviously that could have a detriment. And a lot of it depends on your brand. If your brand is seen as pure and wholesome, TikTok might be too big a risk. If your brand is seen as a disruptor brand, if you're the Harley Davidson bad boy kind of a brand, what have you, TikTok might be a perfect fit for you to be even more disruptive. So it just depends a lot on the persona that your brand has taken.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just gonna quickly have a look if there are any more questions. I think that might be all of them actually for the minute.
I'm grateful for the chance to, if we don't have more questions, to share.
I'm so sorry, we've got one more question. Are Gen Z basically anti-advertising, and is this impacting brands like Facebook and Google who depend on advertising?
I don't have any data that supports that they're anti-advertising per se, but I think that Gen Z is capable of using non-advertising forms of information and communication to make brand choices. And so if that's at the heart of the question, then I would say they are using their ability to get ratings and reviews in their friend networks, and the friend networks can vary by category. I don't use one friend for everything. I might use one friend to make a choice on buying a used bike that might be different than the friend I'd use for getting drinks for my friends on a party, because the friend who knows what drinks are popular might be different than the friends who knows what bikes are popular. I also think it's a little bit wonky to think about advertising through the lens of traditional forms of communication, because there are a lot of executives that I talk to in the way of interviewing that are talking about the brand actions they're taking. And in the Purpose Advantage, the book I wrote recently, I really spend a lot of time talking about that. So advertising today often is in the form of taking an action, and that could be spending money to do an activation. Now, where brands often fail is spending money on advertising to talk about their good they're doing without spending enough money and time doing the actual good. So I think if we're thinking of the classic term advertising, then the answer might be that's a big hill to climb, and maybe it's not as effective. But if we're thinking of the new term of advertising being brand actions, as well as marketing communications and other things, then I think it still matters. And I think at the end of the day, our research clearly shows that preferred brands build emotional connections, and people say advertising doesn't have an impact, but the truth is they get to those emotional connections through a series of actions, whether that's the experience I actually have when I shop about Allbirds, or whether that's I've never shopped for Allbirds, but I read a story about the things they're doing. And is that story a form of advertising? Well, somebody at Allbirds had to work to get that story published.
Great, thank you. So someone else has said, someone has asked me to ask more about what makes a purpose-driven culture. So if you could, they've said, what do you mean by brands that take action, and can you speak to the concept of purpose-driven brand?
Sure. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. The new book I wrote, The Purpose Advantage, I'm going to send you and Julian a free electronic copy that you can distribute to the Network One agencies. So there's no cost. Anyone who wants to buy a copy, I love you, because 100% of the money goes to a charity that supports equality in the agency and brand business called the Brand Lab. But I'll send you this for free, and you can send it with everyone. I'm going to give you an answer to the question, and that is, brands with a purpose have functional, emotional, and societal benefits. If they're global brands, the societal benefits tied to the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. If they're not global brands, they could tie to a local goal that is unrelated to the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals generally relate to 3 areas: planet, people, and community. Those are basically the three. So if you ladder the goals to the 3 areas, it's going to be those 3. We wrote this book. It came out late last year. It's in airport bookstores. I'm sure there's plenty of them still in airports at this point. And what we did is we actually created a workbook. So the stories are the first half of the book. The second half of the book actually shows any brand marketer or agency executives the steps to take to create a sustainable, purpose-driven brand. And then we even went a step further. We partnered with the Association of National Advertisers to help teach brands how to act on this. Unfortunately, a lot of our classes are canceled because of the crisis, although some of them are still virtual. And the functional, emotional, and sustainable benefits need one additional secret ingredient, and that is, metaphorically, you use purpose as a verb. And the brands that are winning, the Allbirds, the other brands that we talk about that are getting credit for this, they are taking brand action. And if we think about it, last year, Patagonia, which is probably on a global basis one of the smaller, most famous brands on the planet. If you think about a small brand, Patagonia is a relatively small brand. And yet people know that brand and they know the heritage of that brand. And what did they do? They walked away from their historic brand equity around do no harm and said, that's no longer enough. We have to protect and defend the environment. So they took their entire strategy and said, that was yesterday, we're looking at tomorrow. Moving from do no harm to protect and defend is a major change. And so as we think about this, this is what we're looking for. One of my favorite examples is actually a European brand, and they make chocolates, and the chocolate economy has a huge problem. 2% of the chocolate economy goes to 4 West African countries, but 70+% of cacao beans harvested for chocolate come from those 4 countries. So 70% of the economy comes from them in terms of the export, yet 2% of the cash, the import, goes back to those countries. And this brand has built their entire brand DNA around that. So I think we're going to see a lot more brands try to hit a price point that's winning and build purpose as a piece of the puzzle. But if you only focus on purpose, I want to be clear, I think that'll be a failing strategy as well. It's going to be purpose plus something. So purpose plus innovation, purpose plus favor. It's a long conversation we could have on purpose. It's an hour at least, but everyone gets a free copy of the book for coming to the webinar. And the answer is it's going to take several pieces of a puzzle to do it. And my instinct tells me that Gen Z will lead a purpose revolution, at least in the US, in the next decade, because their buying power is going to increase dramatically. And we're going to be talking about this for the next 10 years, at least in the US. And that's a personal thesis. I can't support it because it's future facing, but don't bet against it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I think that's all we have time for questions wise, but I'm going to share your details on the screen so people can, oh, no.
The Gen Z report you get through that link. The book I'm going to send to you, Stephanie, so they can get it from you. They don't even have to get to me. Okay.
Perfect. All right, so I just want to give you a really big thank you. Number one, for the great presentation and for answering those questions. I think we all learned a lot. And also for the book as well. I'm sure that everyone will get a lot out of that. I'm especially looking forward to reading it as well. And so really appreciate that. So as I mentioned, if you didn't have time to ask your question to Jeff, you can contact him at jfromm@barclays.com, or you can visit Barclays' website, which is www.barclays.us.com. Thank you all for coming as well. We really hope that you enjoyed it. As you know, because you've hopefully been coming to a few of the series, we will be holding webinar Wednesdays at the same time every Wednesday. So the next one will be held on the 3rd of June at 1 p.m. London time. So the next webinar will be led by Spencer Gallagher, and he'll be exploring where new business really comes from. So if there's one thing which 95% of agencies really need right now, and all the time, is revenue. One critical means of generating revenue is winning new business. But what's the best way to do this? So everyone has a theory. It could be cold calling and emailing, it could be inbound marketing, networking and events, social media activity, PR, search consultants, or even former clients. So if you knew the answers, you could focus your resources better and you could achieve more success at a lower cost. So Spencer Gallagher has the answers. He built, ran, and sold a $12 million global agency, so he really knows how it's done. Today, he runs Cactus, which is a UK-based consultancy, and it helps owners of small independent agencies to become mid-sized independent agencies, so typically growing revenue from around $1 million to $10 million. Last year, his agency-focused consulting business, Cactus, completed a survey of more than 250 agencies in the UK to find out exactly where and how it is that successful agencies most often win new business. So now in 2020, he's collaborated with us, the Network One, to produce a global version of the same survey. So we're wondering, do the same techniques work everywhere, or are some countries and regions really different? We were going to have the results premiered at our Indie Summit this year, but unfortunately that wasn't able to go ahead. So instead, we're going to share the results during this webinar. So you can sign up at our website, which you can see on the screen. It's thenetwork1.com/webinars, and all registrants will receive a copy of the report as well. So you can find future webinars on that site as well. You can also find future webinars. We'll be holding the Indie Forum Digital, which we will be sharing more details about soon, but you can find out more on our website, which is thenetwork1.com/the-indie-forum-digital. So thank you all so much for logging in. Thanks again, Jeff, for that really, really great seminar, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you next week.